But who is here right now is a former regional director for Senator Marco Rubio and a Republican. I want to bring in Johnny Torres right now. Johnny, your thoughts after watching this first day of impeachment hearings for President Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it was what we expected, right? Which was for both sides to kind of make their case as to why this process should or shouldn't take place. Of course, there's a lot of talk right now about Jim Jordan kind of really seizing the day in terms of the talking points, the points that he made that he wanted to get across. Really, what I think is very treacherous territory for Adam Schiff in this scenario, being the chairman of the committee, is the fact that having loosely read the transcript, or this parody of the transcript that he did earlier on in this process, I think I think he knows that he has to kind of step back from some of that and be a little more cautious, because it could jeopardize this whole process. In listening to Andrew Learned, who was just on with you guys, the truth is to be almost nonpartisan in this particular comment, we as Americans don't have the attention span for this sort of thing. I think when there's a lot of comparison, obviously, to the Clinton impeachment, and the reason that I think people were so glued and fascinated to it was because a lot of the national and very personal kind of composition of it all. This is getting really deep into foreign policy, which again, Americans in general are just very ignorant about. Just not very informed on, and of course they're following what's been happening in Ukraine because of the issues during the last two administrations. But in reality, if they get too deep into the weeds, you're going to lose the public. And again, the more you lose the public, the more that the perception is going to be that this is really just an attempt to impeach the president, which the Democrats have made very clear has been their objective for quite a while. And
it was interesting. Our first guest this morning was Richard Harrison, another Republican, a city and state government attorney, and his point was that when Schiff and Nunes handed over the reins to both of the witnesses to give their opening statements, I think he called it a snooze fest, because immediately they both launched into sort of the history of military engagement and America's foreign policy engagement with the Ukraine, right, which was dense topic. As you say, Americans typically very insular, don't care that much about that deep of foreign policy, right, and they got right into it. And I think a large part of the audience sort of dropped off and wasn't as interested anymore.
Well, and also, just on that note, Schiff and Nunes both really came out predictably making their case, their side's case, for what this impeachment hearing was going to be like.
Yeah, and I thought both had very strong opening statements.
They were very strong, but this is all stuff that we've been hearing now for weeks. And so I think you lose a lot of attention that way as well, because there wasn't any new information or new perspectives being presented. And it took them a while to get into the questioning, which is really what people want to hear. And I think that's why Jim Jordan really came out ahead in making those bullet points that are going to discredit the testimony that we heard today.
Your comparison between this, which was clearly an attempt to bring some of these issues to the forefront in public, in front of the American people, compared to the July 24th appearance of Robert Mueller at the completion of the Mueller investigation, which clearly had the same goal for Democrats going in. Yeah. What do you think the results were day one of this versus what was the only day of that?
Well, again, I think you look back at what happened after the Mueller investigation. I think you look, you even kind of look at what Kayleigh McEnany was saying, right, which is that the president's popularity has been solid among the base. The fundraising has been far more than they expected. It's been through the roof. And again, going back to the point I made about attention span, if Democrats are not able to succeed at whatever it is they're trying to accomplish here, right? Let's say it is impeaching the president. Our attention span's not there to wait for another 6 to 9 months for that to happen, and it's going to seem like they've lost, right? They've really lost this challenge. And again, going into the final stretch of the campaign, the longer this takes, the more it's going to seem like there's not really much there for the Democrats to hang on to. And so far, it's only proven to strengthen the base for the president and his fundraising.
Interesting, because I think supposedly the Democrats' plan seems to be for them to do this quickly and to possibly draw up impeachment articles before Christmas is what some of the indications have been. You're saying that and obviously I know you're a Republican, but you're saying that it would behoove them, if that's their aim, to do it quickly versus draw it out.
Because I think if this goes past the holidays, you've lost it.
Right.
You've lost the attention of the American people.
Right.
Once you get into Thanksgiving and then right into Christmas, right into New Year's. And if you're losing the attention of the American people, essentially because their goal is to impeach the president, to swing the election, they are going to miss out on both of those things.
And I think also, and worth pointing out too, you've got multiple senators. In fact, all the leading candidates, with the exception of Vice President Biden, are mostly senators. Certainly Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, that are running for the 2020 nomination on the Democratic side, would have to hear an impeachment trial in the Senate. You start pushing that too far into the new year, then you've got your leading candidates sitting in the Senate listening to an impeachment trial versus being out on the campaign trail. And the Iowa caucus is February 3rd.
Well, and there, there's some kind of at the grassroots level, there's a little bit of murmur saying that that maybe that's by design. To basically give Joe Biden some breathing room by some of, by Bernie Sanders, by Elizabeth Warren, who are currently in the lead for that nomination, on his tail, give him a little bit of breathing room and allow him to campaign because he's not involved in the process. And that's going to free up both the top end of the ticket being currently being Joe Biden and the bottom end being Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Kamala Harris, and weakening Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the process. So that's getting a little into the weeds.
Yeah, but actually, now that we're on the topic, I mean, slightly off topic from the impeachment hearings, but who do you think, I mean, as a Republican who worked for Senator Marco Rubio, a former presidential candidate himself back in 2016, someone who, got run over by the Trump train, really. I mean, if we look back, and that's no offense to Senator Rubio.
No, it was remarkable
just
to
the way
watch
that it happened.
Because, he obviously lost the primary pretty badly, against Trump, but then he came and swept the state in the Senate race.
Right.
So
and still got more than any of the other candidates. I think 26, 27% in the primary in Florida, which was obviously nowhere near where the eventual president, ended up where he was. But who do you think presents the biggest challenge to President Trump in next year's election? Is it one of those senators or is it Biden?
No, I think it's still Biden. Okay. I think because Warren and Sanders, I think on both sides of the aisle, are seen as too far to the left. They are seen as being, basically, as some Republicans would call socialist, right? Really pushing the lines economically in terms of capitalism and Wall Street. And so Biden, I think, is still seen as a moderate. Yang, Gabbard, Kamala Harris. More so Gabbard and Yang seen as more moderate. And honestly, for those never Trumpers, as were mentioned today in the hearing, I think candidates like those are going to be far more attractive to an independent or a never Trumper than even a Biden, a Warren, or Sanders.
What do you make of the possible the current flirtation and possible run by Michael Bloomberg?
Well, again, I think that'd be a blessing for Republicans.
Really?
You
don't see him as being, if Biden is seen as too weak or too old, although Bloomberg is in the same age range.
Yeah.
But you don't see him as cannibalizing votes from Joe Biden?
From Joe Biden, absolutely. That's what I mean. He'd be a blessing for Republicans because he'd take some of that steam away from the Democratic side of the ticket. And Bloomberg, while he claimed to be a Republican initially and then considered himself an independent, very much governed in New York like a Democrat, and some very controversial policies there that, again, I don't think would even make him a viable candidate to begin with. And given an independent run, he obviously avoids a primary, but I think he steals away from some of your more moderate Democrats in terms of votes and some of those independents and some of those never Trumpers, people who may have regretted their first vote.
Johnny Torres joining us, a former regional director for Senator Marco Rubio in the state of Florida. We are also hoping to get Representative Greg Steube, who is a congressman in Florida, representing Sarasota and a large swath of southwestern Florida, to join us here in the next couple of minutes. We hope to bring that to you in the next few minutes, and we'll certainly keep you advised of how that effort is going. One of the things that Andrew Learned brought up right before you came on, Johnny, was that there were three elements in his mind that he thought were present here that made what the president did impeachable. Number one being that the president used his office for personal gain by requesting an investigation into one of his political rivals. That 2, he did it in an extortative way because he was withholding military aid until that investigation was at least announced publicly by the president of the Ukraine. Yeah. And that 3, the White House tried to cover it up by using this alternate server and trying to make sure that people knew as little as possible about the call. Do you buy into any one of those 3 lines of thinking?
No, because again, what we're looking at here is the narrative again that was being put together by Nunes and by Congressman Jordan, which is, the president, was he investigating the Ukraine's interference in the 2016 elections, right? That being the first narrative that's trying to be built there. Second, what was Hunter Biden's role at this company? That was also very controversial in the Ukraine, and to what extent did they have an influence on pro-Russian policy that was going on during their, Ukraine's problem with Russia, and then of course there is, like the fact that this was a brand new president. A fairly young president also that Ukraine just elected. You diplomatically kind of hit the reset button to figure out where each other lies. It's a new administration. Again, the president on record has been shown to be incredibly helpful to Ukraine during these last 4 years. And so there wasn't a question of him not being supportive of Ukraine. It's a matter of feeling out, okay, where is this guy politically, and are we on the same page and can we move forward? Or is there some adjustments that have to be made here diplomatically? And it was about earning that trust between President Trump and the president of the Ukraine.
I thought, by the way, that was the strongest line of questioning or narrative that was given by Republicans when they said, look, he was withholding this aid because this is a very corrupt country. Yeah. He wanted to see whether or not, obviously this is a matter of whether you buy this story or not, but I thought it was a strong point that they were saying, hey, look, he wanted to hold up the aid to see if this guy was the real deal. We sent over Pompeo. We sent over multiple ambassadors. Vice president was there. Yep. They checked him out. They said that this guy was the legit, and then they released the aid. Well, the timing sort of, you can if you believe the other side, then you believe that maybe there were other pressures on them.
Sure, absolutely. But I think the clearest point here was that Ambassador Taylor said in his opening statements that if at any point he had felt that we were not doing our part in terms of foreign policy to assist Ukraine, that he would have resigned immediately. And he talked about being close to that.
He was prepared, yeah.
Right? Because he was questioning the moves that were being made by the Trump administration. But it says more to me that he didn't resign, despite the fact that, again, this assistance was being held. Because, again, for him, that was where the line was drawn. And so if we never crossed that line, then that means that it was all still good in his eyes. Now, this is where he's kind of compromised himself, because Republicans are going to say, well, it's not Ambassador Taylor's job to dictate policy, and to try to enforce the policy that he saw favorable to the Ukraine. But again, those were the terms that he accepted the job under, and it says a lot more to me that he didn't resign than it does about whether or not that the timing of the aid was held or not.
We Johnny Torres here, former regional director for Senator Marco Rubio in Florida, joining us. I got one more question for you. I want to keep you around for, Johnny. Want to just give everybody an update and check back in with JB. First of all, I want to let you know I'm in real-time communication with the communications person for Representative Greg Steube. Unfortunately, won't be able to join us right now. He's a member of the judiciary, excuse me. Steve Martin always has a funny joke that word always makes you sound drunk, judiciary. He is on that committee, and he's in some hearings right now, in some meetings right now. He's not going to be able to join us today, but we hope to bring him to you on Friday when we come back for the day 2 of the impeachment hearings. So just want to let everybody know what's happening here, and we're going to bring JB in for just a second to talk social before we do a final question with Johnny Torres here.
Yeah, we have an interactive poll up on WFLA's Facebook page, everybody. Of course, we're right here at WFLA in Tampa, Florida. Tampa going to be a pivotal swing state in the 2020 election. And so here at WFLA in the Tampa Bay area, if you follow Evan or myself on social media or any of our previous streams, you know that the I-4 corridor is going to be pivotal as far as a geographical location goes in the 2020 election. We're asking our WFLA Facebook fans a poll question. Day one of public hearings are in the books. Do you support the impeachment proceedings? We have 3 different options here. Yes, I support. No, I do not support. And then undecided or no answer if you would prefer not to say in a poll like this. But we're gonna come back here in about 90 seconds, Evan. I'm gonna give you the results here of that interactive poll. And if we do we're gonna be wrapping up here in the next few minutes, everybody, on impeachment hearings, our live analysis here. But we're also gonna have more for you on WFLA.com and our various television station websites across the country. Wherever you're watching us from, everybody, go to that television station's website for more coverage of today's impeachment hearings. There's a lot to break down. It's gonna, of course, carry over into tomorrow as we just continue the analysis of everything that transpired today before the proceedings pick up again on Friday. So come back in about 90 seconds, Evan, and I'll have the results of that poll here for you. Let's go back to you and Jonathan.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Actually, that'll give me a chance to ask Johnny Torres here one of my final questions for you. Johnny, I noticed that Republicans on the committee today were, with very few exceptions, with the rare exception, were very respectful of these 2 men, that George Kent and Bill Taylor, pretty much lifelong patriots who have given their lives to public service. Did you find anything about them to be not credible or that they were slanted in any one way or the other?
No, and really what you'll probably hear from the grassroots really is question, again, it kind of feeds a little bit of the drain the swamp mentality, the fact that Mr. Kent was, he's a lifelong bureaucrat, basically, multi-generational bureaucrat, and so that might work a little bit against him, but again, it is respectable that both of these gentlemen, especially Ambassador Taylor, has quite literally put his life on the line for this country and has been recognized quite often for it, and they've both served under multiple administrations in various capacities, and so I think that gives them a lot of credibility, and especially right now in an election year, I think it's not like we maybe saw in previous hearings. You have to be a lot more tactful, again, as to how you approach these witnesses, because people don't react well, especially for someone who is a decorated veteran like Ambassador Taylor, to go ahead and question their credibility or their commitment to serving their country. And so I thought it was very smart of them not to do that. And I think as long as they can continue to keep the focus on exactly what were the intentions of the Trump administration, I think the House Republicans are going to be just fine in this proceedings. And I don't think, especially based on today, I don't think that they have what it takes to get the votes that they need for an impeachment.
I wonder if maybe somebody had a word in President Trump's here, because he initially sort of tried to attack those 2 weeks ago, and then I noticed has sort of backed off of that, because I think you're right. It doesn't play well when you're talking about people who have actually served.
Well, and again, it doesn't help Republicans either. We saw actually Congressman Schiff bring up some of the tweets, and some of the other Democrat Congress men and women mentioned the president's tweets during this, which again really has no bearing in the process, but they're using it as a way to characterize the president and maybe what his intentions are. And so even when he put out a tweet about never Trumpers, again, it just makes things a little more complicated for the Republicans who are sitting in these committee hearings. And I hope that they do tell him just to kind of sit back and be more of a spectator in the situation. But as we all know, it's very tough for him to do, and he's going to be very vocal throughout the process. I just hope that it doesn't jeopardize it, because I think as it stands, I think, again, much like we see in court, they have to prove whether or not, what the intention was here. And I think Republicans have enough to stand on that they don't have to go to those lengths to try to fully discredit these witnesses.
And I hear your point about draining the swamp. I think we'd all like to see, some of the swamp animals drained. I'm not sure that that's happening in the way that the president said that it would, but certainly it's a hard thing to do. And I think bigger point, foreign policy is difficult. How we enact what the U.S. wants in other countries is a really difficult thing to do. And so I understand your point that, Kent is someone who has served under multiple administrations and maybe part of that sort of long-time bureaucracy.
It's a rock and a hard place.
But but that's the thing is that, you need people who know what they're doing and are very clear about what our foreign policy aims are. Johnny Torres, former regional director for Senator Marco Rubio in Florida. Really appreciate you joining us, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing your views and coming on to our live impeachment hearing live stream here. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Really appreciate it.